All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm Candace Bannister. I'm the Executive Director of the Tread of Pioneers Museum, and so glad to have Ray Heid with us today. He just recently released his new book, and it might be hard to see with my background here. Let me see if I can get it to work. It doesn't like to pick up other things other than my background. Can you see it? Is it
getting glimpses of it?
Getting glimpses of it. It's called Ray Heid, The Man Behind the Duster. And Ray's asked me to read the back of this so that you can all, if you haven't seen the book or don't know about the book, can get a little context of Ray. Ray Heid is a fourth-generation local legend sharing stories of growing up in Steamboat Springs, Colorado in the early 1940s. His pop owned a grocery store called the Boys Market. They made deliveries to sheep herders camps on the Continental Divide in vintage 1920s vehicles. He grew up competing as a four-way skier and specialty big hill jumper, traveling to all the big hills across the country in the 1950s, from Lake Placid, New York to Leavenworth, Washington. He came of age surrounded by Olympic hopefuls, success stories, and several years as the head coach at the University of Wyoming doing skiing. He spent 20 years in the ski business in Ruidoso, New Mexico. He went on search and rescues as a guide and he went on search and rescues and was in the sports retail business. Ray and his family returned to Colorado to run a guide and outfitter horse ranch outside of Steamboat Springs, and over the years, his passion for skiing and his life as a horseman entwined. The mythical cowboy skier and elk hide duster is promoted and seen as the Western image of Colorado high country. His life stories entertain, and as an old man, he has reached legendary status as he continues to make a living riding horses and skiing for pleasure. He lives the dream on his ranch in North Routt, surrounded by his horses, his children, and their children. So we're so glad to have Ray with us today. I'm going to continue to let people into the meeting. I'll be keeping everyone muted. If you'd like to ask questions at the end, you can send them into the chat function. So those of you who are newer to Zoom, that if you hover down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a chat come up, and then you can put your questions in there, and I'll select some of those to ask Ray at the end. Ray will be talking till about 5:30, and then we'll go into questions. That way we can, in the call, there's usually a Zoom fatigue that hits people at about 45 minutes to an hour, no matter how great the skier is, or the talk. So we want to make sure to be cognizant of everyone's time. So first, we'll start with some questions here, Ray. First of all, we're thrilled that you wrote the book. As you know, the Tread is committed to preserving and sharing the history and heritage of Steamboat Springs in Routt County. And we do that through oral histories, through talks like this. But the main thing we love is for people to write it down, and you wrote it down. And so that's just such a gift to the community, to your family, to our heritage, to the historical record. Can you tell us about what the inspiration was for you to write this book?
Thank you, Candace. Actually, this is my third and last attempt to write a book. I literally started it about 40 years ago, and then just started writing down little notes to remind me of stories, and then put all of that into a computer and switched computers and lost it all. So then I started doing it on a yellow pad, and eventually back to a computer. But I encourage, if you got thoughts, something to go, write just a little note down sometime to remind you of a story that just crossed your mind. Because, in a few generations from now, people won't have any idea of how we lived or what we did to get here. And so I really, really encourage everybody to start making notes, keep just something to remind you of a story. You don't have to write the whole story down at that time, but just something to remind you of the stories that crossed your mind. And, but I start off usually everybody saying, I was a city boy. And people look at me kind of curious, well, what city? I said, well, I was born and raised in downtown Steamboat Springs. But in those days, that was the city. But I dated every girl in the country I could because I wanted to be a country boy someday. But growing up in downtown Steamboat, we kept a horse in our front yard. And if old Banjo was in the front yard, why, we'd get on our tricycles and our bicycles and ride around town till we found him. Bring him home, and Mom would saddle him up. And 4 of us little kids got on that old horse. And Mom would pack us a lunch. We'd be gone all day and come back in the evening. I'm usually right up towards Fish Creek Falls, where my friend's dad had a little stable. And come back and bring old Banjo back in the evening. And on weekends, we'd bring some of those horses into town, literally tie them up along Main Street and rent them out for $1.50. And if they wanted somebody to go with them on a ride, why, us little kids would say, okay, we'll go along. So I'm sure I started going on horseback rides and helping people before I went to kindergarten. In those days, they didn't even have kindergarten, but it was the first grade. And but in the years, I've been fortunate enough, like I said, to write down some notes to remind me of stories, and things that we did. And now that, thanks to my friend that I met 5 years ago down in Taos, who had just finished writing, helping a book and then writing another book, why she kept saying, you got to write a book. And well, I've tried and tried. Anyway, she ended up coming to Steamboat, spend a little time, gave me an outline of what it's going to take to get a book going and keep it going. And she called back about a year later and she said, I'm going to come up to Steamboat and get you an outline. I said, who is this? And she said, well, Ray, this is Irene. You met me in Taos on a chairlift a year ago. And she came up and has really, I tell the stories, but she's the one that put it all in print. And that's where the man behind the duster, and Ray Heid, has got into print, and it's incredible. The stories, like somebody told me the other day, stopped me and said, Ray, I started reading your book and you mentioned something in your book that reminded me when I was 6 years old. And he said, I'm 70 now, but just one word that you mentioned in your book that reminded me that what I was doing when I was 6 years old. And it's the stories like that just keep unfolding to remind me of why I did it, and so glad that I had the help I did, and we got it in print and got it published, and having terrific reviews and responses.
Well, and that's, I was going to add in is, it's become extremely popular. We sell the book at the museum store. So if anybody would like to get the book, you can call the museum or email me, and we can get the book to you. We're open on Fridays and Saturdays from 11 to 5. And then starting June 1, we'll be open Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 5, the museum itself, as well as the museum store. The book has been flying off the shelves, as I'm sure that your daughter Hillary can attest to, because we keep calling her for more copies. What do you think is the thing that's really driving such popularity? Sometimes Routt County folk can be a hard audience and they love this book. What do you think they love most about the book?
Well, it's the way it all unfolds. And like somebody said, it's not like you were promoting yourself to be a big hero or something. You were telling stories the way they happen. And they were able to get them on the print and feel like, they couldn't wait. One person said, I started reading it and I couldn't quit. Because I've been around you so long, I've heard so many of your stories, I kept thinking, okay, when's he going to tell that story? But it's just a collection of stories that got around the campfire, and people would come up on, sometimes their 7th or 8th pack trip with me. They said, Ray, we've been on pack trips with you for 4 or 5 days at a time, and we have yet never heard you repeat the same story. So you was fortunate enough to get this down and get it into the orders where people are really really enjoying it. And some say, well, once I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. And another friend says, well, I glanced through it, and then I go back now and I try to read just one story a night to make the book last as long as possible. He said, it never quits being entertaining. I guess I'm blessed with the fact or cursed with the fact that I'd love to tell stories.
Well, so one of the stories, I think, so when I posted that we were doing this talk and that you were releasing this book on the Facebook page, Routt County Memories, which everybody on this call might want to join if you like this sort of thing of sharing stories. People overwhelmingly talked about talking to you and your family at the boys market. Can you talk about some things that you share in the book about the boys market and just kind of that idea of that small town store in a small.
You know, guys, okay if I bring it out here?
All right. Yeah, my granddad and they came to the valley in, I think, in 1905 and had a ranch out 20 mile and then a homestead. And they sold the homestead and moved into town and got into business in a little store on Lincoln Avenue. And actually the east side of FM Light and Sun store, they split their store in half. The east side of that store was the boys market, my granddad and my dad's grocery store. And Hazy Warner, my aunt, was a checkout lady at the grocery store. And people would call Hazy and say, okay, Hazy, we need this. And Hazy knew everybody in town. And twice a week, we'd load groceries up and make home deliveries right into, right in town. And I was in the gondola, oh God, that's probably been 15 years ago. And these three ladies were in the gondola with me and we got talking. I was telling some stories. She says, well, you must be one of Bob Hyde's boys. And I said, yes, I am. She said, well, you delivered groceries to my house in the wintertime. I said, well, where'd you live? She said, well, up by the Lithia Springs. And I looked at her and I thought, you must be Mrs. Combs. And she says, yeah, I am. And I said, how old is she? At that time, she was in her 70s, late 70s, 80s, and still skiing. Wow. But I remember the snow was so deep that we'd take the groceries in the back door. The snow was almost as deep as the roof. We had to slide off the snowbank into the back of her house, and put the groceries on the table, and put everything in the ice box that needed to go in the ice box, and then leave a bill and keep going. And the boys market, oh golly, my dad also did the home delivery type things, but all the sheep camps, most of the sheep camps along the Continental Divide. And in those days, we had an old 1920 Chevrolet that had wooden spoke tires, but my dad and Bus Nelson and Ed Warner reached that old car up, had two transmissions, so put it in low, and it would just creep up a hill, and we could go just about everywhere. Of course, I go back into the wilderness now, and I unfortunately can still see some of the ruts from that old car, but that was in the 1940s, 1950s, long before the Wilderness Act. But we'd usually stop by the fish hatchery down on Yampa Street every time we left town, and we'd take 5-gallon milk cans, fill them full of minnows, put them on the bottom, put our tents and camping and stuff every weekend, and then put the feed for the sheep herders camp. And my dad knew the sheep outfits and the sheep herders, and pretty well knew where their outfits and how they were moving along the Continental Divide. And it seemed like every weekend we'd be in that old car taking groceries and stocking sheep to just about every lake, which is now the Mount Zirkel Wilderness area. From the little fish hatchery down on Yampa Street, I think it was right next to where the Orion restaurant is now. That was the fish hatchery, and they were raising cutthroat trout, and we'd stock all the lakes year after year after year, little minnows, while we were delivering groceries in that old vehicle.
Wow. Wow. What about, that's a little bit on Boys Market and your delivery. Can you talk about when you were at Boys Market, you know, how it kind of became sort of a social center for everybody to come say hi and meet your neighbor and just that feeling of that small town in that store?
Oh yeah, you know, I just we would butcher all of our own beef just from local. My dad would trade some rancher their grocery bill for a steer, and every Thursday my Uncle Timer and I would go out and butcher the beef. And I always left it hang in the freezer for about 2 weeks to age just perfect. Even after Safeway came to town, why people come in the store sometime carrying a bag of groceries with a Safeway label on them, but they always came to the Boys Market to get their meat because it was the best in the town, the best in the area. Of course, it was all natural grass-fed beef.
Yeah. What about skiing? Let's you know, we cannot not talk about your athletic achievements. Who were your inspirations in your early days of skiing that you think helped you get to the level that you did?
Oh golly, it was in the first grade in that area why Al Wegerman was our ski coach. And even before that, my mom would take us kids over to the ski hill in the morning and drop us off. At noon, they'd shut the lift off, which is the old boat tow, and make sure there was a kid behind every lunch sack. And after we had lunch, they'd start the lifts back up and we'd ski the rest of the day. But I remember one time, usually I'd ride the boat tow up. You could wave your arm outside the boat tow and they'd stop any place along the line you wanted off. Normally, I'd get off at the first road, and go over and put my skis down and lay down on them, come down like I was on a toboggan. Yeah, no. One night skiing, at that time there was one light at the top of the hill and one in the middle of the hill. I was at night skiing, but I kept going and went clear to the top of the mountain, got off the boat tow and went over underneath the light and realized I was on top of the mountain. And I guess I sat down and cried. And somebody finally came by and said, "Ray, they're going to turn the lights out here in a little bit. You better get down off the mountain." So I put my skis on and started down. And when I got to the bottom, I could not wait to get back on the boat tow and go back up again. And that was probably when I was 3.5, 4, 5 years old.
And the top of the mountain at that time on the boat tow was where?
We're right at the top of the Holliston Hill now.
Okay.
That was as far as the boat tow went.
But then the chair T-bar combination
Yeah,
went
right.
all the way up.
And in those days, when Al Wegerman was the coach, he would give us a grade on our report card in school. And we got a grade on downhill slalom and jumping and cross country. And the only 4 A's I ever made all the way through school. It wasn't the studies, I guess, that kept me going, but the skiing is what I made my whole life in the ski business, in the horse business. And it spent a lot of time skiing from our house in downtown Steamboat on Hill Street. When they turned the lights on from the kitchen table, we could see the lights on Holliston Hill. We'd grab our skis, Mom would take us over and we'd head to town, hit the mountain until it got dark. And even in the evening, coming back, we walked back over from the ski hill, across the little bridge, but always went to the Lion's Drug for a hot chocolate. It even had marshmallow in it, you know. The brews in the Lion's Drug in those days, that had to have been in the mid 1940s in that area, that always had to went to Lion's Drug for a hot chocolate before we went home.
Wow. what about, how far up did you go now? I know you competed in college, and then how far up did you go in either national or international competitions?
Okay, well, I went to the University of Wyoming actually on a full ski scholarship, boardroom and tuition and books for 4 years. And then when my 4 years was up, I still had one semester before I could graduate. So I went back and they asked me to be the assistant coach at the university. And then my philosophy in those days was, well, the easiest day of the
But
year.
we're not getting any sound. You. Let's see.
Uh-oh. I think we've lost Ray. Ray, it looks like we got,
Where is your volume?
Ray, it looks like we got muted.
You're back on.
Okay,
Thank you. If you could start back just about 1 minute. We got muted trying to mute someone else that was coming on the call. You're all set. Just go back to starting as the assistant coach.
okay, yeah. And that was in 1961. And so once I got the team going, and my philosophy was, you know, the easiest day of the week is going to be when we do the ski race.
Line.
Because after that, we had to walk up every training one we made. And so the following year, they asked me to be the head ski coach at the university. But the year before that, when I was assistant coach, I spent that whole year coaching and then traveling all over the United States to every tournament. And at that time was trying to make the Olympic special jumping team. And the things we did to get around in those days was unreal. One of my favorite stories is I was in Leavenworth, Washington at a ski jumping meet. And oh golly, they have a last jump of the day. They let us start anywhere in a mountain, try to set a new distance record. And friend of boy from the Washington State University, Torbjörn Jägerstedt, he had been sixth in the 60 Olympic special jumping. And he went off just before me and set a new distance record. And a few people clapped, let it go. And I came off right after him. And I always left my boots pretty loose so I could get way forward. But when I fell, my feet came out of my boots and my skis kept going with my boots in them as I went charging down the hill trying to pick up my skis. A couple of thousand people just went wild, cheered. Torbjörn Jägerstedt says, well, you sure know how to seal a crowd, don't you? Because those people they always showed up with a big case of beer. But anyway, that night I missed my ride into Seattle. And all of a sudden it was getting dark. I thought, oh man, everybody thought I caught a ride with somebody else. I was standing out on the highway with my 8-foot jumping skis. The guy pulled over. Yeah, it was Olaf Uland, one of the jumping judges with my dad. And he says, well, I'll give you a ride to Seattle, and here you can stay in my lake house down on the lake, and in the morning just call for a taxi and I'll take you to the airport. And so got to Seattle and got into Steamboat. I called Anson Samuelson and I picked him up and had my car at the airport. When I didn't show up, he took my car and went home. I called Anson and I said, well, I'm in Steamboat now. I'm at the airport. Can you come pick me up? He said, well, I'll come in at 5 o'clock and then get off work. So I went in, was sitting in the lounge. These guys were sitting there and they could tell they had just come in from skiing. They had the goggle eyes and red face. Got chatting with them. And one of the guys said, well, are you going to jump in the St. Paul Winter Carnival next weekend? He said, you know, it's going to be on the Wide World of Sports. I said, well, you know, if I can catch a ride out there, and this was on Monday morning, Monday afternoon. So he went back and came back and he said, well, if you can get away right now, can you leave? And I said, yeah, you know, I'm working at the University of Wyoming, but I can get away. He said, okay. He said, why don't you get in the airplane with us? We'll take you to to St. Paul, and you'll be there for the tournament. Well, it turns out they got checking with the guys. They were all the main executives from 3M Mining Company. So when we got to St. Paul, where they said, okay, we decided that every one of us, you'll stay with each one of us for one night while you're here, and we'll throw a big party. And then they found out I was there in the ski jumper, and they wanted to talk about it. So every night I ended up on the 10 o'clock news. And it turned out the queen of the carnival was from back east, but her and I'd always show up and every night for the 10 o'clock news. Pretty soon the celebrity papers were writing about the ski jumper and the carnival queen, and carried on. But I did hit a great jump. It was filmed on the Wide World of Sports. This guy that was running the Wide World of Sports at the time, Jim McKay, came up and said, well, you the best jumper going. He said, and I was filming when you jumped in the 60 Olympics in Squaw Valley as a 4-jumper. And he said, you had one of the best jumps of the tournament. And it turned out they ran my jump for several of the news broadcasts for the 60 Olympics. And Jim said, visiting with a bunch, and I ended up getting third that day. And the next year, why I wanted to go to Innsbruck for the 64 Olympics, because Buddy, my cousin, was competing. And but I went to the athletic director and I said, I need to get to Innsbruck to work with one of the kids I've been coaching on the jumping team. We'd like to get some extra help, but I'd like to be there, in 3 or 4 days. It's no problem, Ray. The university will cover your expenses. So I said, well, there is a problem. So with that, I said, I don't have a passport. He said, we can take care of that. He called the governor. The governor says, no, I can't really help you with that. He said, he made a couple of funny. He called the White House. And he said, I want to speak to Mike Mansfield. And that time Mike was special assistant to Kennedy, and I think he was the Democratic chairman for House something or other for Montana. He got on the phone and they were BSing. And he said, Red says, Mike, you haven't been out hunting with us for a while. He said, but I've got one of our coaches here needs to get a passport and needs to be in Innsbruck the next few days. And the guy said, well, have him mail all of his birth certificate and everything else to me at the White House. And I'll take her. I said, we'll make that too. It's fine. Well, I'm going to take my mother, Ruby, along, Hazy's sister, to Innsbruck. So we fly into New York, and they're paging me in. He said, you didn't sign your passport, but there's a limousine sitting out in front. It's got flags on the gate such and such on the front end, and they'll take it to the immigration office. We pull up in front of the immigration office. The guy was standing out on the curb. So Mr. and Mrs. Heid, well, this is my mother and I. If you'll come in here right now and sign your passport pictures and stamp them. Limousine took us back to the airport. So Mom and I got on the plane and flew into Innsbruck, Austria. I went to the desk and said, well, I need a car and a room. And the lady just laughed. She said, there hasn't been a car or a room around here for months. The nearest room is probably 80 kilometers away. I said, well, do you have the number for the Olympic Village? And the gal said, yeah, why? We'll call it. She did hand me the phone. I said, I got the operator there. And I said, this is Ray Heid, and I'd like to speak to my cousin, Buddy Warner. And she said, hang on. Wasn't but hardly any time at all. But he said, Ray, what's the matter? What's wrong? I said, well, Mom and I are in Innsbruck and we can't get a car or a room. And he said, stay right there. You're over, yeah. Well, they called me a little bit later and said, well, Mr. Heid, would you like a new Chevrolet or a Mercedes or a Volkswagen? I said, well, I'll take the Volkswagen. And so I went to and he said, you have a room at the Marian Teresa Hotel in downtown Innsbruck where you can watch the jumping right from your room. So Mom and I checked into the hotel. And I told her, I said, it's been a long day, but I'm going to go see if I can have a beer. I went down, I saw a little bar was packed. I don't know how many people in it. But at the end of the bar, this guy was sitting there with an empty seat next to him. I kind of elbowed my way through and I walked up to the guy and tapped him on the shoulder. And how do you say anything in German or something? Is this seat? And I looked at the guy and I said, he says, yeah, Ray, sit down. I said, excuse me? Yeah, Heid, have a seat. I said, I've only been in Innsbruck for 20 minutes. Who are you? He looked up at me. He says, I'm Jim McKay. He said, I filmed you in the 60 Olympics in squad. I filmed you in the wide world of sports in St. Paul. What are you doing here? I said, well, I just flew in to help one of my skiers. And he said, well, then you don't have tickets to anything. I said, no. He said, well, here, take my jacket. It just said ABC Sports Staff. And he says, follow the film crew. They'll take you any place you want to go. Just follow the film crew. And he called this one of the leads. This gal's one of our interpreters. She speaks 7 languages. And she'll be waiting at your hotel every morning to guide you around. And so that is walking up the Olympics, got to the bobsled course. And here's this guy on the edge of the bobsled, hanging out over the bobsled trail, this sled's coming right at his face. And he's taking pictures of these guys going by. And I walked up and I said, buddy, it was my cousin. He said, I'm getting the greatest facial expressions you could imagine from these guys in the bobsled. And, but end up then spending some extra time there because I had to spend so many days to get the plane ticket I got. But he said, well, go up to St. Christoph and they'll know you're coming. I'll give them a call. And here's my guy that made my first ski pants, the tight-fitting ski pants in St. Anton. Stop in there. So I'm in St. Anton walking down the alley and looking for this address. This gal comes by and I said, do you know where this is? And she says, you know Buddy Warner? Over there, Buddy was more of a hero than any sports figure in America you can think of. And it was just the gold crown to do anything I wanted practically in Europe, as long as he was such a hero over there. People in Steamboat, he'd come home after winning the major ski races all over the world. Somebody said, well, Buddy, what'd you do this winter? Are you still climbing poles for the power company? And people in Steamboat didn't even realize that what an international hero he was in the alpine world in Europe.
Mhm. Skiing was always a bigger deal there, and that's where all the leaders were until Buddy came along.
Yeah. And Buddy, the first year he went over, he actually had just missed the Olympic team, but wasn't even quite an alternate, I don't think. And one of the boys, I don't think it was the Olympic team, that was just a world championship tournament. And they asked, one of the guys broke their leg, and they were getting some kid from back east, because just about everybody on the Federal International Ski Association in America was, the power was in the east. They were sending somebody over. He couldn't make it, and they called Buddy. And he actually left right from his classroom in Steamboat and flew into Europe. And just, there hadn't been an American, ever win an international who beat the Austrians in Europe till Buddy showed up. But right from the beginning, he proved, he was the biggest celebrity you could ever dream of in Europe. You'd still come back to Steamboat and people wouldn't even realize that he had been out of town.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure you're glad you spent that extra time with him because of the ski accident that took his life shortly after that.
Right.
So those are some special memories, I bet, for you.
Yeah, for anybody and everybody in Steamboat that knew him, he was just one of those kids from Steamboat that he never forgot somebody. And he always, if he saw them, even across the street, he'd holler at them no matter where they were and say hi and go visit with them. Just that friendly, normal kid from Steamboat Springs, Colorado that had that country charm.
Mhm. Yeah, and it spread that, put us on the map through his travel and through
Oh,
his
yeah.
achievements.
All over Europe, no matter where you went, if they knew you from Steamboat, where they all had a story and wanted to visit because he'd left a mark that was just incredible.
Great. Yeah, I love seeing the I Never Look Back
Yeah.
film. Really uncovers a lot about him if anybody wants to learn more about Buddy. We're moving on time here a little bit, so I want to move maybe into some of your more recent past, living and working on your ranch up in North Routt and hosting people from all over the world on pack trips and ski trips and all kinds of things. Can you share some of your best memories as an outfitter and as a horseman?
Oh boy, one of my favorite stories. Quite a few years ago, but these 6 ladies called and said they wanted to do a 5-day pack trip. But they didn't fish and didn't take a lot of pictures, but they wanted to ride a lot every day. Well, when they showed up at the ranch, they were all in their late 70s. One of them was 82 years old. And this is back when I was 60. And they came up to me and said, "Now, young man, we want you to understand, we came here to ride a lot." So I took them to the furthest camp we had. It was like a 6-hour ride just to get to camp. We pull into camp and one of the ladies said, "Well, is this all riding we're going to do today?" So man, the next day, got them up early. We rode clear up into Wyoming, went over the Continental Divide and out the other side and came back. And we were actually in the saddle for, oh golly, a good 7 to 8 hours. And I thought, man, okay, I wore these old gals out, now I can rest for a couple of days. And the next morning, one of the gals came by and kicked my sleeping bag outside. My wife slept outside and says, "We've already got our horses saddled and we've had breakfast. We'd like to be on top of the Continental Divide at the break of dawn. And we don't need to stop for lunch. We can eat on the horses." And I had 5 days of that. They rode me into the ground.
That is a feat.
Yeah.
What was their story? Where were they from, these gals with no rest?
They'd all been getting together for almost 50 years. Their husbands belonged to a group of guys called the Roundup Riders of the Rockies.
Mm.
And that's like 100 to 200 guys would get together for an 8 or 9 day pack trip. But they'd always come out every night where they had a big semi there with showers and live entertainment. Well, the gals would get somebody to go into the wilderness area where the big groups couldn't go. You can only take 25 heartbeats per trip into the wilderness. That included horses and people. So if I took 8 people and their horses and a cook and a wrangler and a pack horse, well, so these gals would every year find somebody in the general area where the Roundup Riders of the Rockies was going, but they would go where they knew the guys, the big group couldn't get into the wilderness area. And they found me and they called back a little later and said, "We want to do another trip. We don't want to go anywhere we've been." And I said, "Believe me, gals, you covered every place on that mountain in that wilderness area that we can go on a horse."
Wow. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
that is a feat. Someone who outrode you on a pack.
And how?
Well, and talk a little bit about, and I don't know whether I heard you talk about this or whether it's in your book, these, I think when I think of you, well, not only first when I think of you in your duster. Then when I think of you when you were on the museum's board of directors. And then next, when I think of you, I think of these stories of your going into the, wilderness and other areas and doing backcountry ski trips. including what we were talking about before the talk began on Sand Mountain. Can you talk a little bit about these, and you had these caves and huts that you'd go back to and old mining camps where you'd set up. I mean, those stories, I aspire to be that kind of outdoors woman, which I am not, but I'd like to be. Can you talk about some of those things?
Yeah, the Sand Mountain trip, oh golly, we've done well, I started doing it in the 1955 or 54, 55 with all the ranch kids from Clark, and they had picked it up from John Fetcher, who would walk from his ranch to the top of Sand Mountain. So that's when they had just closed all the country schoolhouses and started busing all the kids into Steamboat. And these ranch kids said, "Well, we'd like you to come skiing with us." He said, "We're gonna climb Sand Mountain." I said, "Oh God, I've heard about that forever." So I'll show up about 6 a.m. and we're gonna. So at that time we drove up to where the old sawmill is, just above our ranch. And of course, these kids, the only time they skied was in the spring or a little winter carnival they had here in Clark at the time. And but they just had their little low, almost walking shoes and their wooden skis with pine tar on the bottom of them. And their dad, Orville Bedell, the two, Dick and Bob Bedell, went with us, along with Elvin Tuffley and Roy and Glenn Whitmer and their dads. But they were all on wooden skis with pine tar on the bottom of them. And I'm on my Northland racing skis with ebonite bottoms, my long thong bindings hold my heel down with bear trap bindings. Well, these guys could unhook the cables on the side of their skis and just walk right along like normal. And boy, my heels are locked down. Time I got to the top of Sand Mountain, I felt like my calves were about to be ripped out of my body. And I stood there, and the first one to take off was Orville Bedell, and old Orville Jr.'s dad. And he, on his 8-foot skis that he had made with no edges and just one groove in the bottom, and he made the big sweeping turns from tree line to tree line coming down that. And of course, I take off after he gets down making these hop, pop, 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 dynamite little turns. But I noticed all the next week, I'd look up on Sand Mountain. You couldn't see my little tracks, but you could see those big sweeping turns that Orville did. I'll never forget them. So anytime I get in the hills, unless I'm with a bunch of the Niners who insist you ski within a foot of the person in front of you, and nobody takes up the whole slope. But every time I go up on Sand Mountain, I use that whole mountain from side to side, so I can see those tracks for weeks after we made them.
You're still doing some of these trips. I mean, I don't know your exact age, young, but you're still doing these backcountry trips and going and staying in a cave. And I think talk about some of these places you go and stay when you do these backcountry trips.
We had a friend here in town, Gates Gooding, and he and my cousin Loris Werner and John Elliott had done these overnight trips. Leave the top of Rabbit Ears about 10 o'clock at night on a full moon when the crust had set up, and ski all night, and then get up to Mount Ethel about the time the snow softened the next day and make a snow cave, spend the night, and get up. And sometimes we just do short trips back to that same cave. And then we'd usually get down to the seed house. And because my dad always supplied all the food they needed and helped cut firewood on all the ranger stations, we had a key to the seed house. We had to dig out the door. Spent the week just skiing the backcountry. And to this day, I love. It's been a while since I made a snow cave and skied in it. But I actually tried to get in. I thought we can make a living at this. So I printed up a little brochure. It just said winter camp trips for snow cave. in the spring and full moon in March and April, and sometimes in May. And about a year later, somebody called and said, I want to do one of your snow cave trips. And I said, where are you from? She said, well, I'm from back east. I said, well, get used to carrying a pack, and little narrow cross country skis and a good weight on it. And that spring, my mom called me she said, and I told her what to bring and everything else, but never heard from her. My mom called me and said, well, there's a lady at the airport in Denver that says she's booked a snow cave trip with you. And I said, oh my golly. I called and had her wait there. I drove down from Laramie and picked them up, got some groceries. Mom takes the top of Rabbit Ears Pass about 10 o'clock that night in a good crust. We take off, and the first little downhill we come to, she does a face plant and just face first down into the snow. I go pull her up out of the snow, and I said, well, I mentioned you ought to ski every day carrying a pack. She said, oh, I did. She said, but we didn't have any snow last winter. I was going out on the frost on the golf course every morning. She said, this is the first time I've skied on snow with a pack.
Oh my gosh. So I'm sure you probably amended the trip when you found out she hadn't skied.
Well, she skied good, but she's not used to carrying a heavy pack on little narrow skis.
Mhm.
But she actually came back the next year for another one. And but that was really the only paying customer I ever had. I was just a good 40 years ahead of myself. Back those days, we never saw a track of anything all the way across the Continental Divide, before snowmobiles and all of that. Maybe close to Rabbit Ears, you see a few people doing some hiking. But after we got up past Summit Lake and what is now the wilderness area, you never saw a sign of another person. I love the snow cave trips. Still to this day, in fact, a few years ago, I think it was 2017, we got like 8 feet of snow in April and May.
Whoa.
And I thought, man, I had a pack trip booked the 1st of June. So I told my son, I said, well, let's go up, see if we can even get to the lakes because the snow's so deep. And so we had to leave the horses and walk almost all the way from where our camp was to the deep snow. And one little spot on the lake was thawed out with fishing. But when I started to go up on that trip, I thought, well, I'm going to take my skis and my boots along. I might get some skiing in up there if there's any place we can fish. So I'd left my skis and my boots in a little cave up there. And all summer long, I'd take people on fishing trips. And while they were fishing, I'd go dig my skis out, climb up a little chute that still has the snow in it. It was August 28th. I went back in with a group of people, and there was one little couloir up there that had some snow up in the rocks. I went up and made 4 turns on it and figure eighted those 4 turns. My son came down and said, Dad, you can't call that skiing. I said, hey, I made figure eights and I'm out on the 28th of August that year.
Wow. That is something. Well, we're getting on, believe it or not, almost on an hour. We have a couple of questions that have come in. So I want to share those with you and give you a chance.
Wait, I haven't even got started yet.
I know. Well, again, we're going to send people to your book, which again, because of the white background, you can't see it. You can get more of the stories in the book and can purchase it here at the museum. A couple of questions that have come in. Oh, thank you, Catherine, for holding up the book because my background won't pick it up. So Ray, we've got a question here. My name or a comment. My name is Karen Ebert Aragon. My dad is George Ebert, E-B-E-R-T. He was born southeast of Steamboat in 1926. It's an honor to be here tonight. I bought the book for Dad for his 95th birthday next month. He tells me so many stories similar to you. He also remembers you from Steamboat. The search and rescue team saved a friend of mine and I stranded up on Rabbit Ears Pass back in the winter of 1976. Thank you for everything. Then we got another one. Hi, Kathy McKinstry here. My dad is Ken Coster, who remembers you from the University of Wyoming. He was a swimmer there at the same time you were on the ski team. He had great memories of those days. And
I
then,
remember, yes.
oh, good. Then we've got, this is Irene Barba. This is a bonus for all the viewers. A few stories came up after the book was finished and it was really too late to add more to the book. I was always impressed with his folks, Bob and Ruby Hyde, and all their efforts to get the boys and so many others to ski jumping meets all over the country. Ray tells about the ski tracks and the wind wreaking havoc and the skis flying all over. Again, very impressed with what those trips must have been like. Ray, please share that story.
Irene's the one that basically I told the stories and she wrote the book.
So she wants you to share the story of the wind and the skis flying everywhere.
Off of Bob and Ruby's.
Oh, golly.
Yeah.
Yes, that's one that I don't think I put in the book, but Pete Corral just left. He was sitting there as I am. But anyway, in those days, we go to every tournament, but we skied every downhill slalom, jump, and cross country at every tournament. Well, we only had 3 pair of skis apiece. We had our alpine skis, our cross country skis, our jumping skis. And one time we were going to Whitefish, Montana for the junior national ski championships. So it was 5 of us in the car, 3 pair of skis each, so 15 pair of skis on top of the ski rack on these posts that we had each 3 pair of skis to each post. And someplace out in the Midwest, we were driving along and the wind changed, and the wind had been blowing so hard against one side that it had loosened the straps on the ski rack on that side. So I run around the corner and the wind changed. The entire ski rack went flying off with 15 pair of skis on it. And we were digging around a snowbank out there in the prairie for hours and hours.
Oh.
We finally found everybody's skis but one of my alpine skis. We never did find.
Oh man. It sounds like you got pretty lucky finding as many as you found.
Oh, and how?
Another question came in. If you could tell one story that sums up what defines a real cowboy, what story would you tell?
Well, I ride horses 6 days a week for a living. I ride for the fun of it on Sunday. And when I go on vacation, I load my horses up and go someplace else and ski. And 2 years ago, we were at the Women's World Cup race in where was it?
Killington.
In Killington, Vermont. And my granddaughter, Sawyer, and I were sitting there I was drinking a beer waiting for mom to finish some business. And behind me, these 3 guys were sitting there, and one of the guys talking to the other guy said, I ride horses for a living 6 days a week. I ride for the fun of it on Sunday. And when I go on vacation, I load up my horses and go someplace else and ride. But you know, they call me a cowboy, but I've never owned a cow in my life. I turned and I said, who in the world are you?
And who was this person?
I was here with the film crew filming the World Cup ski race, and I saw you in your elk hide duster. And he said, for 18 years, I worked for Channel 18 and Steamboat and filmed all your commercials. And that line, every time I see that elk hide duster, I think of you're just exactly the way you say it every time.
Oh my gosh, you surely made an impact on him.
Yeah.
So someone else, Liz, would like you to tell the story of the Zirkle blowdown.
Well, my son-in-law was sitting there, just got up and walked off because he was there that night.
Oh, he's still traumatized, huh?
Yeah, oh man. Yeah, that it was, oh golly, it was 1997. And the end of like the 29th or 20 of October, somewhere right in there. It was the last hunting season. We'd pulled out all of our hunters out, but we'd left the tents. We had to go back in and bring the tents out. And Chris, my son-in-law, and my son Perk, and a friend Tony Decker, and three of their friends with one of the Corbetts. And I can't right now off the top of my head, I can't think of the other guys that were there, but they were in the cabins up in Diamond Park that when the wind hit. And on the way in, while my son noticed that we'd had about 3 feet of snow. It had rained for 2 months up until then, and the ground was saturated and soaked, but it snowed and the ground never had time to settle or freeze up. And he noticed on the way in at these big pine trees, 40, 50 feet tall, with trunks you can't reach around. When they were swaying and the earth was moving underneath them. So when they got to the camp, my son said, I'm going to park my truck out in the meadow tonight. And because, those trees were moving around out there when the wind wasn't blowing that much. And one of the guys, everybody moved the truck out, but one of the guys said, no, my parents have had this place since the 1930s, and I'm not worried about it. And I guess when the first gust of wind came over the mountain, I wish Chris was sitting on this side of the microphone. Well, the trees, they had 18 trees hit the cabin that night. And they could tell every time a tree hit the cabin, that it would just fill the cabin up with dust. It'd been sitting there since the 1930s. And Chris and Perk and Tony were sleeping in the tents. First gust of wind blew the walls out of the tent, blew their cots away, their sleeping bags, even blew the stove out of the tent. And they went over and got in the cabin, and it would come in gusts. There'd be just a horrendous gust and then nothing. And so when the second gust came by, Perk and Tony and Chris said, well, I'm gonna go check on the horses. But fortunately, the horses are in a little krail we'd used for many years. They'd tramped the snow down, the dirt down so tight around those trees that none of the trees blew around on the horses. But on the way back from the checking on the horses to the cabin, another gust of wind hit. And Perk said he got down on his hands and knees. Pretty soon he was flat on his belly and felt like if he lifted his head up, he'd be like a balloon bouncing across the valley. And he looked over and saw his pickup truck just bouncing sideways out into the meadow. And the next morning when that story can go on for several pretty good sized bottles of Royal Crown. The next morning, we had a place up there you could get right outside the old cabin, and we had what we called the phone booth where you could get a cell service. He called me right at daylight and he said, boy, the wind blew something crazy up here last night and the trees down everywhere, and we're going to need help. He said, even getting out of the cabins. So get over who you can and come up and see if you can help us cut the road out. And I think we spent 20 some hours. We were cutting. I stopped in at Johnny Snyder on the way up there, and he cuts firewood for a living, and said, we need somebody to help us. First of all, Ray Corbett and I were cutting from the south end heading north, and we started to cut a big stump, and we were 20 feet in the air cutting these trees that still had root balls on them. And this first one started, as it started to snap, I hollered, I said, get back, get back. When that root ball flew, it jerked the chainsaw right out of my hand. And I said, we're not loggers, and I'm going to go see if I can get Johnny Snyder, somebody that knows what they're doing. I stopped in and he said, well, what is it? I told him that the guys were up there and there's so many trees we couldn't get the road open. And so he grabbed a couple of chainsaws and we took off. But on the first going in, before we realized what it was, we got to what's called the hole in the wall. And here was about 20 trees across the road, all huge. And, this is weird. So I got out and took a picture of it. We cut just an arc underneath it where we could drive under it. we called another guy that had a backhoe to come along, and then we got up to where we could see and realize that in the saddle, between each peak of the mountain and saddles, the wind came through that saddle, going against the, instead of coming out of Pacific Northwest, this wind was coming straight out of the east. And it was ripping up every tree under and below each saddle on the mountain ranges as we went. The trees are 30 and 40 feet tall and deep with root balls still on them. And when I came out, I called search and rescue, and they said, no, we don't do chainsaws at that time. So I made a couple more calls. And finally, I called the Forest Service, and I said, try to get a hold of somebody, because I need permission to cut a right of way back into the Diamond Park. They said, well, as long as you stay on the road and make sure you don't get off the road, take a few trees if you need to. And of course, there was, oh God, what the Weather Channel, and what was the first one?
9 News.
Discovery Channel.
The Discovery Channel, I think, called and got a hold of the guy and said, so they came out and interviewed the guys, Chris and Perk and Tony, and then it showed one time on a Discovery Channel, and then I was doing a show, I just had the guy from Jim Canturi from the Weather Channel was here for the Weather Summit in Steamboat, and he was out to the ranch filming our winter horseback rides for the little short on the Weather Channel. He heard us talking about this storm. And he said, well, we're just getting ready to start a program called Storm Stories. And we'd like this to be the first one of our shows that we're going to focus on. And so they came out, and we created the first time when we did it for the Discovery Channel, to recreate the windstorm, I went down and got all the fans from the hot air balloons and blowing them up as Becky, Perk's wife, and I were sitting there shoveling snow as Chris and Tony and Perk come out of the tents and faking it in there. I said, well, go back in, let's take another shot on this. And he told this guy that had a big old tractor there with a huge blower on the front of it, enormous twin blowers. Could we borrow that tractor for a minute? He said, yeah, who's going to drive it? I said, well, Becky will, Perk's wife. He says, well, I'll show you how to do it, but I don't want to be around here and see what you're going to do with that. So we got to come up to recreate the windstorm, and it was in the spring when the snow was too heavy for the balloons. And so our vision was, the snow would be blowing here, the film crew would be over here, and we'd be coming out of the tent on the other side of it, and it'd get the shot. So after we did that, he said, let's do another shot like that. He got on the radio to Becky, said, okay, when they come out of that tent, turn that blower right on them and open it wide up. And we were on our hands and knees crawling, and then the snow was coming, it was blowing us backwards as we were trying to crawl through this storm. We got back by Perk, and Chris looked at me and said, that's just the way it was. But they showed that on the Weather Channel now in fact, it was 4 or 5 years ago. I had a friend call me, and he says, Ray, I'm out in the Pacific Ocean on a sailboat. We were pulling up the weather for where we're in there. They showed the Route Divide blowdown. And he says, I was raised in Clark. My grandmother had what is now the Round Mountain Ranch. And he said, when I saw that out here, he says, I knew every tree or every area you guys were. And this is 20 years after they did the original show. They were still showing that on the Weather Channel every now and then.
Wow. I'm gonna have to look that up and try to watch it.
The Route Divide blowdown, it's called.
Yeah, I remember that. I was here in '97 actually working for the Forest Service, and
Oh, wow.
did some work up there. So I remember it well. So we had another question come in. Ray, this question is, this is the question my dad, Pete Gorell, has is, will the book come out in large print or ebook? He's got macular degeneration, so can't read the regular font, but would love to read your book.
Yes, it's on ebook now.
Kindle.
Or Kindle Direct.
And
Yeah.
you can do large print on Kindle.
Uh-huh.
Okay, perfect.
Hey,
That'll,
there's a guy sitting in the pictures below us down here. This little guy here on this bottom, Pete Corell.
yeah.
He made my first custom-made saddle. Pete made it for me. And he had me come up almost every week and sit on the tree from the very beginning right through the end of it. And finally, after it was all done, and brought it home, and he gave me a bill for it. And I said, don't ever send me a bill, but I'll send you $100 a month from now on until that saddle's paid for.
Wow.
Back in 90, what it was, 93, Pete would probably remember better than I did what year it was. Last year he was in Steamboat before he went to Montana.
Mhm.
You know, what I paid for that saddle was half what my little brother Delby paid for this whole ranch. And it's so good to see Pete in the crowd down there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you've got
Talking about him every day.
you've got a good crowd. Well, we're
Yeah.
moving on to about 7:10. Is there any last stories that you want to share with this group tonight, or just tell them to read the book?
Yeah, read the book and go to Kindle Direct, you know, and you can get it,
Amazon.
huh?
Amazon.
Amazon. You can, on Amazon, you can get the a copy of the book to pick it up on your laptop or your cell phone or anything.
In the museum.
Huh?
In the museum.
I think, yeah, and definitely go by the Tread of the Pioneers Museum and get a copy of it. And if you can even leave it with Candace and tell her if you want an autograph, I'll go buy an autograph, any book that she has that somebody bought and wants me to autograph it.
Yeah, we can mail books. We can do whatever anybody needs to do.
Yeah.
One last question's come in, says, have you kept track of Kenny Neal? Have you kept track of Kenny Neal, Gary Francis, or Don Davidson?
Oh, boy, and how. Yeah, Ted, we lived in the athletic dorm at the University of Wyoming. Everybody was on a full scholarship. They call it the APOS, because everybody lived in the athletic dorm was on a full athletic scholarship. And for, oh golly, 20 or 30 years now, they've had a reunion of the people. And Ted Francis was a great friend. He came here and helped Delby, my little brother, when he got the ranch first started, and spent a lot of time in Steamboat, left a lot of memories around the area. But those guys are all, I think, at one time or other lived in the Ape House with me.
Wow. Well, Ray, thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone who's joined on the talk. I've recorded the talk, and it'll not only be in the museum archive along with the other 500 oral histories that we've recorded over the last 30 years or so. But in addition to this, I'll post it on YouTube, and it'll be on the museum's YouTube channel. You can follow us, or you can just go on the museum's YouTube channel and you'll see this talk. I'll put it up tomorrow. I'll also post it on our Facebook page. And so if you want to pass the link along to other people who you think would enjoy the talk, please feel free to do that. And otherwise, we hope everybody gets the book and enjoys the book. It looks like you can put reviews on Amazon to talk about how much you love the book. And I think you can still send people Ray's way to Dell's Triangle 3 Ranch and go on pack trips.
Pack trips, and I ride horses 6 days a week for a living. So.
And on Sundays for fun, and when you go on vacation, load up the horses. Anyway, thank you.
You'll probably hear that line while you're on horseback.
I can't wait. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ray. It's been great knowing you all these years and all of your time with the museum. And really, for writing this book, it is such a great memoir of our local history from a great perspective. It's a gift not only to the historical record and to our heritage, but it's a gift to everyone who can get the book. And And I know it's not easy, and thanks especially to Irene for helping you write the book. It's just a real treasure, and we want to encourage everyone who has these stories from our local history to write it down. And even if you don't write a book, write it down. We have an archive here, and we just want to make sure we can keep Routt County history alive.
Well, Candace, thank you so much for all the promotion you've done for me there at the
Sure.
Pioneers.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thanks so much, Ray. And thanks to Hillary for all your help. Everyone have a great evening.